So if your yoga practice is starting to go beyond just the physical postures, I mean, if you're trying to move from a really strenuous asana sequence straight into deep meditation, you have probably hit a wall.
Oh, definitely.
The body's still, the breath is, regulated, but your mind is just absolutely refusing to play along.
It's a classic bottleneck in the eight-limbed path of yoga. And today, for our deep dive, we are getting into the ancient technology designed to solve exactly that.
Right.
We're talking about Pratyahara, the fifth limb of Patanjali's Adoga system.
And this is the one that's often called the forgotten limb, but, our sources are really clear that it's actually the crucial structural piece. It's the bridge.
Exactly. It's the bridge. It connects the external sort of gross practices like asana for posture and pranayama for breath control to the internal, more subtle practices like dharana, which is concentration, dhyana, meditation, and eventually samadhi.
And without a strong bridge, you're not getting your consciousness across the raging river of the senses.
You're not. That's a perfect way to put it.
Okay, so before we go any further, let's break down the term itself. We hear pratyahara. What does that actually mean?
The Sanskrit is, well, it's beautiful and really descriptive. Prati means against or away.
Okay.
And ahara is anything we take into ourselves from the outside. It literally translates to food.
So pratyahara is?
It's gaining mastery over external influences. Or, as you usually hear it translated, the conscious withdrawal from the senses.
And the most memorable image the sources use for this is the famous...
The turtle analogy, yes. It's so good.
Yeah.
Imagine a turtle just withdrawing its four limbs and its head completely into its shell. The shell represents the mind, and the limbs, well, they're the unruly senses.
And pratyahara is that conscious, deliberate act of pulling in.
Pulling it all in.
It's interesting, though, that a practice defined by stopping something is considered so critical. I mean, is it really not possible to just jump from a body practice into mental focus?
Well, Swami Shivananda went so far as to call Pratyahara the most important limb in Yoga Satana, and the reason it's so necessary is actually quite simple. The senses are the direct link between your body and your mind. If the senses are constantly running outward, chasing things they want or running from things they don't, the mind will just follow them. You can't get to inner stillness when the senses are buzzing with external input.
So trying to meditate without pratyahara is, as the sources say, like trying to gather water in a leaky vessel.
Exactly. You can pour in all the nectar of truth you want, but it will just seep right back out through the senses.
That leaky vessel analogy is incredibly apt, especially when we start talking about ahara or food.
Right, because we tend to think of food just in terms of what we eat, calories, and so on. But yogic science understands three different crucial levels of intake.
So we already established the first is physical food, which nourishes the body. But what are the other two? I think they're especially relevant for modern life.
They really are. The second level, and maybe the one we have to focus on most in the 21st century, is impressions.
Impression.
These are the sensations, sound, sight, touch, taste, smell, that literally nourish the mind. This is everything we consume, visually or audibly.
And that's where the constant bombardment from media, from social feeds, from our computers, that's where it all lands.
It lands right there. It feels like our whole culture is designed to fight against pratyahara. We're constantly pushed to seek the next bright color, the louder noise, the more dramatic sensation.
Yeah, totally.
And then the third level of ahara is associations.
Associations.
The people we hold dear, or even just the people we spend time with, they nourish the soul and they affect us through these subtle, energetic qualities called the gunas.
Sattva, rajas, tamas.
Exactly. Clarity, passion, and inertia. If you're always around someone who is, say, really angry and rejectic, that quality is going to impact your own mental state. It's inevitable.
Okay, so pratyahara is twofold. It's the conscious choice to withdraw from the wrong ahara.
Bad food, toxic impressions, negative people.
And at the same time, opening yourself up to the right ones.
Yes. But let's focus on that withdrawal part for a second, specifically Indriya Pratyahara, which is control of the senses. The sources use a really stark comparison here.
What's that?
Just as junk food makes the body toxic, junk impressions make the mind toxic.
But is it really practical for someone listening today to, police every single sensory impression they have? We have to interact with the world, right?
Of course. It's not about policing every single sound. It's about recognizing the junk.
Okay.
Powerful dramatic content, excessive violence or sex, These are the mental versions of dead food. They need huge amounts of stimulus, like salt and sugar, just to feel real.
And when we gorge on them, we're conditioning the senses.
Like untrained children, exactly. We're teaching them to dominate the mind and make it unstable.
So every time we choose that powerful external stimulus, we're building up a kind of toxic subconscious. We're basically fighting our own efforts to find any peace.
You're creating this profound, unnecessary mental burden.
And that's the core connection we have to get.
It is. Sensory inputs build the subconscious. If you try to meditate when your subconscious is just stuffed full of powerful, toxic impressions, you're basically guaranteeing your mind can't hold that nectar of truth. Pratyahara is what strengthens the mind's powers of immunity against all of that.
So given that the mind is complex and our senses are, well, incredibly powerful, Pratyahara has evolved into a whole system. It's not just one technique.
That's right. It's a vast system. We have 4 main forms to gain mastery.
Let's start with the practical side of Indriga Pratyahara, that control of the senses.
Okay, so the simplest method is just sensory fasting.
Sensory fasting.
It just means temporarily cutting off external inputs. It could be as easy as sitting with your eyes closed, or you could take a dedicated media fast. No phone, no TV, no laptop for a set period.
Which today, with constant notifications, is practically a superpower.
It really is.
And we can also use sensory impressions positively, right? It's not just about cutting them off, but about managing them.
Exactly. We can use uniform impressions, like gazing at a vast ocean or a clear blue sky. That kind of homogeneous input really helps to cleanse the mind. Or we can create positive impressions ourselves. Using mild incense, having flowers around, or visiting places that just feel full of positive energy. You're feeding the mind with good sattvic ahara.
I find the concept of creating inner impressions really fascinating. That idea of shifting away from the gross external world.
This is where visualization comes in. You might visualize a deity or a peaceful place, but also practices like Laya Yoga, which is focusing on the inner sound and light current. It basically uses the senses against themselves by giving them a subtle internal object to lock onto.
Okay, moving on to the second path, prana pratyahara, the control of vital energy. I understand the senses just follow prana.
They absolutely do. The senses are like feelers, guided by the flow of your prana. If your prana is scattered, your attention is scattered.
So pranayama is the gathering of that energy.
And pratyahara is the conscious withdrawal of that energy back toward your center.
This includes some really powerful practices, like visualizing the death process. That sounds, intense.
It is an advanced technique, but it's highly effective. You visualize the life force withdrawing from your extremities, from the feet upwards, which naturally shuts off the senses as the energy leaves them.
And Ramana Maharshi famously used a form of this.
He did. At 17 years old, it led him to an experience of self-realization. So it's powerful stuff.
Then the third form is karma pratyahara, controlling action. How does controlling our hands and feet help with withdrawing our senses?
Well, the senses bring in an impulse, and the motor organs express that impulse. So if you control the outflow of action, you interrupt that whole cycle of sensory reaction. This is fundamentally linked to karma yoga.
Performing action without attachment to the results.
Exactly. The Bhagavad Gita puts it perfectly. Your duty is to act, not to seek a reward for what you do.
I can see the practical application there. If I train my hands and feet to be still when I sit, I'm using karma pratyahara to manage that physical restlessness that always kills my meditation.
That is the perfect connection. Even just the dedicated asana practice is a form of karma pratyahara. You're training the body to be capable of extended, quiet sitting.
Which brings us to this bigger idea of preparedness, or yogada.
Yes, yogada. It's the philosophical underpinning for why all these forms even exist.
So what is it?
The idea is that concentration cannot be forced. If you try to compel the mind to focus, it just creates a counter-urge. It's like a rubber band snapping back.
Right.
The entire system, body, prana, and mind, has to be fit, willing, and ready for concentration. Pratyahara ensures that fitness. It creates a spontaneous ascent, not a forced, grudging effort.
That structural soundness is necessary because the last path is the hardest one. Mana pratyahara.
Withdrawal of the mind itself.
Yeah.
This is the highest form, where mastery is complete. The mind is the sixth sense, the one coordinating all the others.
And the analogy is the queen bee.
Control the queen bee. The mind and the worker bees, the senses, are automatically controlled.
So Patanjali describes it as the senses imitating the nature of the mind.
Yes. In Yoga Sutra 254, he says, when the senses do not conform with their own objects, but imitate the nature of the mind, that is pratyahara.
What does that actually mean?
It means the senses just stop chasing external things and instead reflect the formless, tranquil nature of the mind that you've been cultivating. But, and this is important, without being good at the first three forms, a weak mind trying this will just be overwhelmed.
Right. Like trying to contain wild animals.
Exactly.
Okay, for the listener who values practical steps, let's explore the techniques used to actively trigger this internal shift. And we have to start with what is often called the ultimate Pratyahara technique, Yoga Nidra.
Yoga Nidra, or yogic sleep, is very highly structured. You do it lying down in a relaxed state like Savasana,
Right.
and it systematically guides your mind inward, completely withdrawing the senses until, at first, only the auditory channel is still operating, listening to the guide.
And it's broken down into 8 stages that are designed to move awareness from the noisy external world deep into the subconscious.
Yes, and the early stages are so critical. It starts with internalization, where the mind is saturated with sound until it just becomes disinterested in anything external.
And then comes the Sankalpa.
And Sankalpa, which is a very precise, focused intention or a positive resolve that you plant deep into that newly relaxed mind.
Then that's followed by the body rotation, which feels like a simple awareness exercise, but it's actually tracing consciousness along your neural pathways.
Following the prana channels, but without any physical movement. Then breath awareness deepens the relaxation and the sensations of opposites.
Like hot and cold, heavy and light.
Exactly. That harmonizes and stabilizes the entire nervous system. The whole point is to neutralize the nervous system's reactivity.
And once the mind is deeply internalized and calm, you move into the visualizations to purify the subconscious.
And a final repetition of the Sankalpa to really cement the transformation before you slowly, systemically re-engage with the world in the last stage of externalization. It's a complete engineered journey into Pratyahara.
Beyond that, we also have mudras, or seals.
Yes, powerful tools. They help create an energy loop around the brain and seal off energy that would normally just leak out through the senses.
The most dramatic one is probably Shanmukhi Mudra, where you use your fingers to literally close the 7 gates, the eyes, ears, nostrils, and mouth.
Right, to encourage listening only to the inner sounds. It instantly induces sense withdrawal. It's incredibly calming for the nervous system.
And then you have more subtle techniques.
Like Shambhavi Mudra, just looking towards the eyebrow center. This calms the mind and diverts energy that's normally wasted reacting to things. And the powerful Nasikagra Drishti, or nose-tip gazing, which is a great concentration technique that anchors the visual sense.
And this all ties back to the physical practice. A lot of people think a strenuous practice like the Ashtanga primary series is purely physical, but Pratyahara is playing a role there too.
Oh, it absolutely is. When you're doing challenging asanas, Pratyahara is achieved by turning the focus inward, using those specific concentration points, the drishti.
So you're concentrating on alignment, on the breath,
and visualizing the body part being activated. This intense internal focus on breath and body just pulls your attention away from external distractions. It moves you from an intellectual understanding of a posture to true kinesthetic intelligence.
The body is moving, but the mind is still.
That's it.
So Pratyahara is this necessary first step. It's the cessation of the improper habits before dharana, directing the mind, can even begin. What does this process actually feel like? I imagine the senses don't just meekly give up their territory.
They do not. The texts are very clear that gaining Paramavashada supreme mastery over the senses requires great hard effort. For years, perhaps. The struggle is real.
Why?
Because the mind has to be cured of what's called involvement.
Involvement, that sounds a little vague.
It just means attachment. Both your positive likes and your negative dislikes are forms of involvement.
Okay.
If you really like a certain sound, you're bound to it. If you really dislike noise, you are also bound to it. You're emotionally invested in the external world. Pratyahara is the attempt to get relief from that bondage.
So if we fail, which we will, probably many times, the instruction is clear. Never be dejected.
That is the key philosophical lesson. It's captured so well in that story of Robert Bruce watching the spider fail 100 times before it finally spins its web. That struggle you feel in your own practice is often just the time it takes to break through a thick wall of your own obstructing karmas, or that veil of ignorance. The scriptures are really emphatic about this. Persistence is the only thing that works.
And what's the ultimate payoff for all this persistent, often difficult withdrawal? I mean, beyond just control, why is turning inward so powerful?
It all comes back to energy management. Think of your consciousness as a power station.
Okay.
External activity through the senses is the expenditure of energy. It's like constantly turning on all the switches for the lights and fans and machinery outside. Pratyahara is the conscious turning off of all the switches of action.
And so the energy that was being spent on perceiving and reacting and feeding all those external systems, it just returns to the source.
Exactly. The engineer in the power station sees the surge on the meters. The practitioner of Pratyahara feels that surge of energy returning to the mind. The mind, which was once just constantly draining its reserves by chasing sensory inputs, now becomes strong, indefatigable, clear, buoyant, because all that energy is stored within.
It becomes a reservoir of internal health and strength.
And that's what makes it capable of true concentration.
So that makes Pratyahara the ultimate strategy for mastering your attention in a world that is constantly demanding it.
It really does.
This deep dive has really shown us that Pratyahara is so much more than just a vague idea of not looking at things. It's a sophisticated, disciplined system of sensory management.
It's a fourfold path designed to move consciousness from the external fluctuations to the internal stable core.
And its relevance today couldn't be clearer.
It really couldn't. Ancient texts like Ayurveda noted that the inappropriate use of the senses is a main cause of disease. By practicing Pratyahara, we are literally strengthening the mind's internal powers of immunity.
Which is essential for total well-being in our overloaded world.
Absolutely.
We've covered everything from the necessity of yogata and the four paths to the ultimate techniques like Yoga Nidra and the deep philosophical insight of that energy surge persistence provides.
So we'd invite you to consider this final thought as you reflect on your own practice. If true Pratyahara requires conscious withdrawal, not just from the sensory inputs you dislike, the noise, the bad news, the negative associations, but also from the inputs you crave.
Your favorite media, the pursuit of pleasure, that constant reward signal.
Right. How does that constant seeking of external satisfaction serve as a subtle but really powerful form of self-imposed bondage? It's a great question to mull over in your next moment of stillness.